Elon Musk has been massively critical of President Trump's big, beautiful spending bill, and this points to a serious divide within the Republican Party and right wingers in general. Who is correct about the spending bill, Trump or Elon? And what faction of conservatives are best for America? And are we doomed to endless right wing infighting? Will I ever stop asking rhetorical questions? Stick around and find out. All right. So we have this post from on X recently from Elon, and so essentially what has occurred is Trump's recently sponsored tax and spending bill, his omnibus bill, because it's so massive, it's over 1,000 pages. It just passed in the House last week, and it is now moving on to the Senate. And Elon Musk has been very critical of this bill since it passed last week. And so, started an interview last week. He said that I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it could be both. And then this week he got a little harsher, and he posted this on X, and it reads, "I'm sorry, I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it." So Elon Musk has strong feelings about it, although he hasn't gotten too much into nitty-gritty details about what he doesn't like about it. But the largest words, of course, you pull out there is pork-filled and of course just the spending bill. And so we're going to break down the details of the bill later. But I did notice that Senator Rand Paul came in support of Elon. Also, he tweeting, "I agree with Elon. We have both seen the massive waste in government spending, and we know another $5 trillion in debt is a huge mistake. We can and must do better." So getting into these criticisms before you guys respond to these, I just want to point out the $5 trillion in debt that Rand Paul is talking about is this bill includes about $5 trillion in tax cuts, and we're going to break that down and get into that. However, some of the proponents of the bill have argued that this doesn't really add to the deficit in the way that people think, because these tax cuts, most of them, the majority of them, have actually been around since 2017 in a bill that Trump sponsored in his first term. And those tax cuts are set to expire this year. And so what a lot of the bill is doing is it's making those tax cuts permanent. And so the people that are in favor of the bill are like, hey, we're not adding new tax cuts per se. We are just, they are adding a few new ones, but the majority of them is something that's already been going on. And then, of course, Rand Paul is not taking into account any of the savings, any of the things that they're cutting, any of the spending that they're cutting, any of the savings or new revenue that the bill potentially could help bring in. And so I just wanted to put that out there. Rand Paul has said that if it was only the tax cuts, he would support it, but he doesn't support it because it raises the debt ceiling, for one, and it also believed to be increasing the deficit. So I'm going to get into the numbers and the details and like what's in this bill in just a little bit. But I want to know, what's y'all's initial thoughts between this Trump and Elon Musk feud? Is Elon Musk right to be blasting this bill? Is this a good thing for the Republican Party? Is this just part of, like hashing out the best thing for America? Is this signal some sort of infighting? And what's your first thoughts about this bill and whether or not is it a good thing? Is it responsible, or is it overblown spending?
I think my initial question would be, what are we spending money here through this bill that we would be spending money no matter what across the board? Because I think it's really easy to say. So like I could go to my wife and be like, hey, you spent $300 today at the grocery store. I didn't spend that money this week, but it's like, but we have to buy food. We have to spend money in order to run our house. We have to buy. So that's my question. My initial question is, what part of this bill would be happening no matter what through one bill or another this year, to be able to keep things running? And I think it's easy to criticize other parts of the government spending money, when it's like somebody's going to spend the money one way or another. So that would be my first question. My next question would be, my next thought, and it's really just a question, is like, obviously Elon Musk in that X post mentioned pork filled or whatever, it being pork filled. That would be my next question, is like he's referring to like a pork barrel, or like the term pork in a bill typically refers to like taking public money and then concentrating the spending of that in a certain area or for a certain group, or a one-sided thing. So it's like, what is he referring to in the bill that's actually pork? And I'm guessing we're going to get into that because I'd like to know, like what on earth he's talking about, and is it really pork, or is it something that I would disagree with him on and it's necessary?
Yeah, and I pork barrel. When I hear pork barrel, I just think of kind of backroom deals or pet projects that are traded for votes that they're really unrelated to the laws. That's kind of what I think of for pork barrel. But so for me, this is just bringing a debate that has always been there into the public eye, like this kind of, well, we gotta spend something, and we have things that we need to spend, but if a company was going to go bankrupt in 3 months, unless they did something, they would do some major drastic changes, and they would not be adding more debt. Like, that is insanity. Right. So for me, it's just kind of like another excuse. Like, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Okay, we'll just raise the debt limit again. Like, we're going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And like, my biggest issue here is just the same issue that is with every single omnibus bill. And, they, back before the 20th century, in the beginning of our nation, they used to do single issue voting or single topic bills, where they would actually have to debate and take a position on every side. And now you have these 160 combination bills, that you can't vote. I mean, $500 million or billions or trillions or whatever. It's like you can't take a position on anything, and it means nothing. And so I think we really need to go back to single issue voting, and it would bring transparency, it would bring accountability, it would stop this pork barrel stuff that we talked about, it would limit lobbyist influence, it would restore the constitutional intent, actually what it was originally planned to have, and it would increase legislative efficiency over time. And so that forces Congress to prioritize and debate and pass laws on merit, and not just like at the last second, or just throw it in and, okay, yeah, you don't get the opportunity to compromise as much, but then maybe we're only debating things that should actually be debated, and we're not throwing in this pork pet projects and things. And I do think it is realistic, because you might say, well, the government's bigger now and it's more complex and this and that, but it's already the law in more than 40 states. They require single issue or single subject bills, and so it's not just theoretical, and so it is possible. And there's actually a One Subject at a Time Act that's already been introduced to Congress several times. There's growing public support on the left and the right and independent voters. They all want clarity and fairness, and it's a perfect for this populism movement, and it makes good politics. I mean, they don't want to. Why would, in a debate, I've seen, like, when you do opposition research, when I ran for office, they give you a big thing of opposition research, and they say, well, look, your competitor voted for this, and that's ridiculous. And you think, well, they voted for a bill that included 100 things, and it also included that. So was he really voting for? I mean, so it's kind of like everybody has voted then now for something that it goes against what they want, or against what their constituents want, or to get something else. So it's just like, it just makes this big convoluted mess and hides everything. And so it's ridiculous. We need to go back to single issue voting. And I will say this, like Warren Buffett said it best. He said, we could solve the balanced budget issue in one simple action. And he said, that is, nobody is eligible for re-election unless it's a balanced budget. He said we would have it in a week. I mean, it's insanity. So those are kind of my thoughts. And I mean, we're going to get into some of the details here of some of this ridiculousness and some of the things that does need to be there. But that's kind of, for me, the umbrella over this whole thing is, this is the same conversation we've been having for decades, and now it's for everybody to see. And I'm glad, because maybe it's getting more people involved and engaged in the conversation. But that's my initial thoughts on this. Yeah. In
about a minute and a half, Ryan, you just convinced me this is the single biggest problem that our government has right now. When are you running for president?
That's awesome. That'd be a nice platform. I'll just go on rants on that.
Doing single bill as your only platform, or single topic bills, that would be
that's my single topic. Is we need single topic bills. I like it.
I had a little bit of a similar feeling trying to read through these details, because it's one of those things. It's like I'm going to get through some of the details, the big ones. But again, this bill has over 1,000 pages long. There's no way on earth I could break down all the things in this bill. So there's like whole sections that I was just like, yeah, I don't have time to even look at that. So it's just like, I'm just going to hit the highlights. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going to come through that I have no idea even what.
If we had to give if we had to give up you reading this entire 1,000-page bills to get more rhetorical questions in the beginning, I think it was worth it. So I like the rhetorical
Actually,
questions.
we're going to switch gears and we're going to read through the entire bill until we hit 10,000 subscribers. We will not stop reading.
Now we're really
We
filibustering.
will not stop reading until we get to 10,000.
Filibusted. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I like that hashtag. That's good. That's funny.
Doug, you have any initial thoughts about this, or you want me to jump into the details?
Yeah, my instinct is always a little bit more I guess different. But it's like, I wonder why historically we as a people don't tend to care about these kinds of things. Like, we don't watch it. We're not paying attention to this. And then all of a sudden this is like big in the news. Everybody's looking, everybody's paying attention. What's the reason behind that? And so my brain goes to, there's something happening here behind the scenes that we're not aware of yet. Hopefully yet is appropriate, but there's gotta be something going on here, because I mean, Trump sent Elon Musk off with praise from Doge. And now this drama is going down. This, I just can't help but think like none of this is accidental, this, and not that Trump and Elon are talking behind the scenes saying like, hey, you say this and then I'll say that, but there's something else happening here that we're just not aware of. And I think that ultimately what's happening is somebody wants everybody looking at this bill. And that typically means that they don't want everybody looking at something else. Yeah. But I don't know what those are yet. And typically it's only just time will tell whenever we figure out what that was, if we're even paying attention still.
Yeah.
That's my gut instinct.
Yeah. Right. Probably will have already moved on to the next thing and all that. But I think that's a great instinct. I think that's a good point. Just like, what's going on right now that we're not looking at that we should be looking at. Right. But at the same time, I do think this particular one has merit in I don't know, taking the bait, I guess you could say. It may not make any difference, but, we want to get that instead of having 10% of voters engaged, we want to increase that. And I think these kinds of things and demanding single issue things, those would help get more engagement, because I think a lot of people, number one, they think even knowing what's going on, like I share things with other like family members and neighbors and things that they are just clueless. They have no idea. And then they're kind of like, oh, that's interesting, and to me, it's like this biggest deal ever. But then they're like, yeah, well, I probably wouldn't have ever noticed any difference, and it's like, for the most part, it's probably true. And that's probably why most people aren't engaged. But the problem is you notice no difference until you notice a big difference, like during COVID, like that's the problem, is not being engaged. And it's a little. And then all of a sudden, whoa, wait a minute, what? And then you see, where are the rights? Where did the rights go? So that's why we need to be an engaged and informed electorate. And so that's where doing this new platform that I have, this single issue platform, to have everything. That's what we need.
No, it would make it easier, because it would come up in the news cycle once at a time. We would be able to see it, we'd be able to debate it. In this instance with the omnibus, it's like it's everything all at once. So, but I do think this is a really important bill. It's a massive spending bill and also tax cut bill. And will it raise the deficit? Will it save Americans money? Will it save you money on your taxes? Let's get into it. So this is a little bit of my breakdown of the major big points of this bill. The best way I could think of doing this was to make an Excel spreadsheet, because I was just like, there's so much stuff in here. I don't want everyone to be able to see it, especially those who are watching and not just listening. So let's walk. Well,
I love it. Spreadsheets. Man. Bring it on.
So let's walk through some of the major points of this bill. So first thing I want to point out is that this is not my own numbers. I didn't read the entire bill and get numbers. So these numbers come from the Congressional Budget Office, which is supposed to be a nonpartisan committee that's supposed to put this kind of stuff together and these estimates together. However, I will say I have already seen people criticizing the Congressional Budget Office and saying that they are intentionally trying to make this bill look as bad as they can, so that because they don't like Trump, maybe. I don't know who's in it. That might be completely bogus. But let's just say, whenever you have nonpartisan groups, that's, people have agendas. So it's a little hard these days to trust numbers. Statistics like to lie. We'll just put it that way. But these are the numbers that we have. So these are the numbers that I'm going to work with. So we're going to start with so this is a 10-year breakdown. So this is what's supposed to happen if this bill passes, which it's very likely it will. because it's in the Senate right now and it passed in the House. This is what it's supposed to do over the next 10 years. So first off, we have a $3.8 trillion in tax cuts. I have a little asterisk. I'll get to that. But the majority of these tax cuts this is extending Trump's 2017 tax cuts on individuals and businesses. And so if this passes, then you're really not going to see much change to your taxes. It's just your taxes are not going to go back up, because there was definitely, like, I know that this helped my taxes a lot because I was partially self-employed, and there was actually like a big tax break. Anyways, that was like in this for people in my bracket. And so if this does not pass, those are going to expire at the end of the year and taxes are going to go back up. And so again, proponents of the bill are like, it's not a real tax cut. It's just extending this thing that already exists. But it's included in the $3.8 trillion in tax cuts. It is going to temporarily do a 2,000 boost to the standard deduction for most people, and a temporary 4,000 boost for people 65 and plus. This is the one that was a little funky because Trump kept calling this like no taxes on Social Security. It's not technically no taxes on Social Security. It's just giving people who get Social Security a greater tax deduction, if that makes sense. So it kind of reduces the taxes that people that get Social Security would pay. So eventually, so it kind of evens out like no taxes on Social Security. These
Right.
are
I think originally he wanted to do during his campaign, that was one of his talking points, was he was wanting to do no taxes on Social Security, and this is a different vehicle to try to get there, but it's not the same thing.
Right. Yeah, but it's essentially the same idea. 500 increase on child tax credits. This was a big one. No tax on tips, overtime, or certain car loan interest. So this is another campaign promise: no taxes on tips or overtime, especially the big ones. However, these are actually all temporary, and they're set to expire by the end of 2028. And so that is just a temporary tax cut for now, and we'll see if it ends up getting extended in the future. The 2017 ones are trying to get extended right now, so maybe these will keep getting extended forever into the future. Who knows? The reason why it's not the $5 trillion tax cuts that Rand Paul talked about was because we're actually reducing some of Biden's tax cuts to the clean energy tax credits for solar, for wind, and also for electric vehicles. So this would be a $5 trillion like budget fall essentially, but it's not quite as bad because we're putting some of those taxes back into place. We were giving away money or like reducing people's taxes for buying solar, wind, and electric vehicles, and now we're gonna phase those out over the next 10 years.
I wonder, that's going to affect Elon Musk. That's going to affect Tesla. I wonder if that's involved. I mean, also like a lot of that, it's like you get a tax cut for being clean, having clean energy, but it's like you're not really clean. It just looks clean on the outside a lot.
No, it just makes it dirty somewhere else instead of in your where you're doing it.
It's like I'm pumping my unclean energy into my clean vehicle so that I can drive around clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if we should have pulled up there's like a little graphic that shows the person plugging their Tesla or whatever in, and then it goes back to another thing, and then it goes back to the plant over in China or something. Yeah.
Right.
And it's kind of like electric stores energy. It doesn't create or generate energy.
I'm personally glad we're getting rid of those tax cuts. I mean, I want to take care of the environment. I just want to do it in a way that's actually taking care of the environment and
well
not
said.
pretending to.
Yeah,
and I agree with you, and I don't think solar, wind, and electric vehicles are the way to do it. We've had this discussion before. I think that nuclear energy is probably the best, cleanest energy that we should be investing in. And these tax cuts are being cut is a really good thing in my opinion.
And to me, it makes sense though that Musk would be against this, because it would be a little bit against. Like he's doing Doge. We had a comment about how he's doing Doge, and now this is it's like kind of undoing a lot of the work that Doge has done by adding any debt at all, and that makes sense. And then but I agree, I'm all about getting rid of these energy tax credits that don't make any sense at all. I mean, I understand you want to do that when you want to kickstart a new industry, but these are just special interests. This is not actually something that is benefiting Americans and benefiting our country. The other thing at some point maybe we can dive into is whether or not we should be taxing tips, because I have maybe a different opinion on that than what the president and other people have.
What's your opinion on taxing tips?
Well, I guess I just don't understand. I mean, it sounds nice. Like, wow, yeah, that's awesome. Stop taxing tips. This is great. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Tips are like almost 25% of a person's income, like a restaurant worker's income. So if they make $12 an hour and then they get another $5 or $4, whatever, do the math. But why should that one particular industry not have to pay taxes on a quarter of their income when everybody else does? You know, like for me, I don't understand that. So I would say maybe we shouldn't be taxing income at all. That's what we should be doing, is get rid of income tax at all. But go ahead.
Sorry, Doug, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because that's the first step, hopefully in a beautiful world, that's the first step to eliminating income tax.
Now, I'm okay with it then. If we're talking about that, then let's call it that and let's go that direction. But
yeah,
I don't think
it's warming the waters. Hopefully, that's my like crossing my fingers. Like, please make that be the first step. Like everybody gets used to no taxes.
I want to be clear. I'm not arguing for taxes. I don't think we should tax any income.
Right.
So I'm just saying it makes no sense why they're carving out this. But go ahead.
I think specifically when it comes to people that are working for tips, they're targeting an industry that usually gets paid pretty low. And they actually rely on tips, you know, and so they are like they're nursing somebody back to health, essentially. Like they're addressing a pain that's very real for a lot of people. So I think that's the point there. Now it's only helping those people. Mm-hmm. It's not helping everybody, but that is the reason. It's because a lot of people that are working in that industry, they're getting paid. And I've met people that are getting paid $250 an hour. I was about to say that. And then they get tips on top of that, and I'm like, what if you don't get any tips? You know, like how do you survive? It's insane. So
good.
Yeah, I do agree with Ryan's sentiment though about the unnecessarily like targeting. I would appreciate if eventually we could get to the point where we just reduce the income tax to a very low base rate and it just applies to all if we do in fact need it. But that's a conversation for another day. If we find a way to cut it eventually completely, that would be great. I would be all in favor of that. But we would have to cut a lot of government spending to do that. So let's get into some of the government spending that they are cutting. So this includes they're going to be saving, depending on how you say it, $800 billion over the next 10 years in Medicaid spending. And the way they're doing this is they are trying to cut any waste, fraud, and abuse. So a little bit of a Doge-like activity going on here. But the biggest one is right here that they're going to make a requirement, 80 hours. So people that are currently getting Medicaid, if they are able-bodied adults without dependents, they have a new requirement in order to get Medicaid, which is they have to work 80 hours a month, either work, education, or some sort of community service. And so with this requirement, they're expecting to lose 8.6 million people over the next 10 years will lose Medicaid coverage. Republicans are saying this is fantastic because we're going to save a bunch of money. $800 billion on people that don't necessarily maybe need Medicaid. And Democrats are roasting this. And this is their biggest talking point right now, that they're saying that Trump is going to kill 8.6 billion people by taking away their health care. So
dramatic. Isn't Chuck Schumer the big one who's like, everyone's going to die. This is the end of the world.
So we need to talk
about that.
So Medicare versus Medicaid. Okay, so these are serving two different populations. So Medicare is for 65 and older. Medicaid is under 65. Okay, so here's my first response. There's not already a requirement to be working if you're healthy and able-bodied to get this benefit. Are you kidding me? Like, this is ridiculous. Absolutely, this needs to be in place. Like, I had a friend, I think I've talked about this before, and I was in high school. I had a friend that got unemployment, and he could get it for like 3 months, and then he would have to go bomb an interview and then prove to the government that he got an interview and he's trying to get a job. And then he had to go 3 months or 6 months without it, and then he could get it again. But there was a limit to it. Okay. Now he was gaming the system, which, that's ridiculous. But this is happening today, like where it's become, instead of a safety net that gives them time to get back into the workforce and to get what they need, this is what's created a welfare state. And then you have what's called a welfare cliff, where someone actually, like I literally was doing grant application reviews for a nonprofit that would give money to people so that they could get off welfare, because it's a welfare cliff. It's a trap. So what happens is, say they get $800 in benefit per month from the government. So for example, like a housing stipend, and then they maybe get like a food stipend as well. Well, then they go at this part-time job or the full-time job and they get a $2 per hour raise. Well, now they go above the threshold. And so they may get another couple $100 a month from their job, but then now they're above the threshold for that income benefit. So now they lose the $500 per month home credit benefit. So now they actually have less income per month. So what we need, that is called the welfare cliff. And so it's been fixed in some states like Iowa, but the thing is that is a huge issue. And what it's become is the way of living instead of the safety net that helps somebody get back to the productive citizen that they could and should be in the way God created them to be.
Don't forget about welfare babies either. That's a whole thing too. There's all kinds of ways to
incentivizing single parent households. That's a whole nother topic. Yeah. Which we need to be doing the opposite, incentivizing 2-parent mom, dad households.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's my thoughts on that.
No, for sure. You know, and I don't have it on here, but this bill also addresses some savings with like SNAP and it's like food stamps, benefits, stuff like that. Mainly, again, Trump is claiming it's not cutting these things, but it's shifting the burden of responsibility. Some like a 5%, which I'm sure, and I'm sure that's billions of dollars, but 5% is being switched over to states instead of the federal government. So that's kind of interesting. So now it's like dependent upon the states of like how much they want to provide, I guess, in that area. Another savings is $330 billion. They're revamping the student loan programs. This also includes raising taxes on university endowments. So I think this is making it like a little bit more stringent about student loans, like paying back your student loans and stuff like that. So I didn't have enough time to get into like the whole revamp. But here's the big one: new spending. The largest new spending includes almost $50 billion for building a wall and deportations. $46.5 billion for immigration stuff, and then $150 billion new dollars, again, over the next 10 years for defense. And this includes a $25 billion being put to the Golden Dome.
Wow.
With the Golden Dome is Trump's his plan to make a security system over the United States, essentially, that could like shoot down missiles, state of the art, be able to shoot down new kinds of missiles that kind of try to come and hit the United States. Kind of like what they have in Israel, except way the heck bigger.
Yeah.
And so I think this is part of the issue. The two things I picked out, I'm really glad somebody brought up the EVs thing, because I'm going to get into the details of like, is this going to add to the deficit? But I do think Elon Musk, obviously he is a little bit more like libertarian minded financially. Like he's like, well, we cannot spend any new money. I think this is the biggest thing that upsets him. We can't spend new money if we don't cut enough to where this is actually going to reduce the debt. I'm going to get into the debt issue in a little bit and how much we're paying on interest payments. But I do think, I don't know, this whole phasing out the clean energy tax credits, I saw that and was like, this is going to make buying Teslas more expensive. And this is something that criticisms have been for these EV credits, is essentially electric vehicles are more expensive. Rich people buy electric vehicles. So these are tax cuts for rich people, essentially. Also, electric vehicles aren't really that great for the environment. Sorry, Elon, but they aren't. Batteries are terrible for the environment. And as we talked about, unless we have nuclear power, we're just getting this from coal and fossil fuels anyways. And solar and wind is awful for the environment. All that stuff just goes into the landfills. So it's a little bit interesting. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it possible that Elon Musk is just upset about the new spending or not cutting enough stuff because it's not cutting enough stuff to actually like take care of the debt? Or is he more upset about the electric vehicle or something else? What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think that could definitely could play into it. This comment here, sorry, Ryan, I'm covering you up right now. I'm in a Discord that thinks Elon is doing this so he doesn't get kicked out of Tesla as CEO. Thoughts? That's the same thought I've been having this week. Is like, could this be a political play? And I think, Reese, you could be hitting the nail on the head. It could be a financial move for Tesla, but also it could be a political play to try to get back some of the ground that he's lost since he's come out in support of Trump, But
look, we're not best friends. I'm not best friends with Trump. So look, put me back on your favorite side now.
Look, I'm criticizing Trump. I'm criticizing his bill that y'all don't like. He's trying to appeal to another side potentially, which also is a financial play. It's a political play to try to fix his finance problem with Tesla right now and all his companies. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
I do think, like, this is where we should be able to talk about these things individually. Like it's three separate conversations. Like, should we be adding more to the deficit? No. Should we be spending money on a border wall? Yes. Should we be compromising, adding more money to the debt and spending money on the border wall at the same time while not cutting other things? Probably not. So it's three different conversations. So like for me, it makes sense to spend money. Like you can calculate a return on investment for a border wall. You can calculate a return on investment for defense bills. But I will say this is I'm not a fan of these defense bills that are just really lobbying and helping the defense industrial complex. Like that's a whole nother thing where it's like, is this really money that needs to be spent, or is this money that is actually just going into these defense contractors and all that sort of stuff? But I will say this, this is not a bad cost for a wall, because if you look at the wall of China, that would have cost between 13 and 65 billion. And I don't see anybody saying we should tear that down because it's racist. And so, I don't think, for me, like I said, there's a return on investment for that. Now, the question of whether it should be in this bill and should be at the same time of adding debt, I'm not so sure that we should be doing that. And so that's where I would say, yeah, we probably should be spending money in these areas, but we should be removing the spending in other areas to offset it. So,
right. Well, I think that some of that naturally is going to do that. Like if you look at that 46.5 billion for wall and deportations, well, the deportations are going to offset some of the spend on getting them out here, because one of the biggest frauds is that a lot of people who are not American citizens are coming in here and able to take advantage of the welfare system. So we get them out, and then we reduce that problem right there.
Right.
Also, I don't really think that Elon Musk is the budget master that he claims to be. He doesn't really even have the receipts on the Doge savings that he's claimed that he could do. Doge hasn't really, from what I understand, which is pretty minimal because this is a massive topic, but Doge hasn't done what it really is supposed to do. And I wonder if there was a different angle here, if Elon really was in it for a different reason. And just looking at like how he has run his companies before, like with Tesla and stuff, it's not like I don't know. People keep saying he's a genius, and I'm really not sure about that. I don't really trust him. I like some of the things that he says. Like I'm not either anti or pro Elon Musk, but like I definitely hold him at arm's length. Like there's something up with that, and I haven't completely figured it out, but I have my suspicions.
Well, Musk is paying me to support him publicly on this platform, Doug. So I'm going to have to push back against what you said. No, no, I'm kidding. I honestly believe that he was trying his best to cut government spending. I honestly believe that. And I think a lot of the pushback is Doge can only do so much. They don't have supreme authority, like we did that Jafar animation for the Doge episode. It's like they don't have the ability to actually go in and make the cuts. They can only make the suggestions, and then it's up to the administration heads to actually implement the cuts. And a lot of them have tried doing that, and even within the different departments, they get pushback. And so I think it's just really hard to actually. Going back to me and Leslie and the whole budget idea. If I'm on Dave Ramsey's budget app that he paid me to plug. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not getting paid to say any of this. If I'm on the budget app, I wish I was every month, right? Then and she starts saying, hey, you're spending all this money on whatever clothing, which I spend no money on clothing. And I'm like, yeah, but you're spending money over here, and we're trying to keep each other accountable, right? It's very, very difficult to actually make those cuts when it comes down to it, because you're like, well, my shoes wore out, so what am I supposed to do? Not go without shoes for a month? It's like, so I'm going to have to put that back into the budget somehow. And look, we overspent, So it's like, in an idealistic world, it makes sense, but practically speaking, it's very, very hard to cut a budget especially when you're used to living off of a certain amount, and in the government, it's even worse. So
last minute thoughts, Ryan, before we move on to the next section.
Yeah, three really quick things. So one, I would say, Dave, if you continue down the Dave Ramsey path, there's a lot of people that got out of debt, and so he does have the baby steps to do that, which is very difficult, but it is possible, and there are things that need to be, So I would say I agree with you 100%. It is very difficult.
Are we plugging Dave Ramsey now? We need to get a sponsor.
But there's another kind of debt that produces income, so it's kind of like a whole different aspect of that. But I would say the other thing is, Doug, I agree with you. I think that Elon he's doing good things, but we can't jump in his boat, because who knows, maybe at some point, Twitter, you're going to use it to pay for people. They want people to pay for everything with it. And by the way, now there's a brain chip that needs to go along with it. And it's just this total control thing. Like I feel like he's kind of going that route. But then there's other things to support that. But the final thing I would say is, when it comes to when we think about return on investment, so we're going to have new spending here. We have a cost reduction is one aspect of it in business. Is how much money is this going to save us in the future, and or how much money is it going to make us back in income in the future? That's two ways. A third one is cost avoidance, and that's kind of what you're saying, Doug. Is with the deportations and all this stuff, you could calculate the amount of money that is the cost avoidance in the future. That is not money that is going to be not spent that could have been spent. And so I think that's another thing that could go into these calculations for some of these things, because, doing all these illegal immigrations, and it's changing the demographics, and it's changing the voting base, and it's having more spending and all these kinds of things. That's a huge cost avoidance that can be added on top of the justification for spending money on a border and having tight security.
Work that into the budget ahead of time, because you don't know what that's going to look like. But it's a very real issue. Yeah, and I would say that as my final point, Reese, before you move on, is that I think what's happening here that needs to happen, and it's healthy and good, is we are seeing they're at least attempting to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. With Medicaid, for example, some people are pushing back and saying, "Hey, I'm barely making it as it is." I've seen people in the comments saying that, and I'm not able to get Medicaid, or this person I know is not able to get Medicaid already, and now they're trying to cut more, people from Medicaid, and it's like. But if you look at it from the perspective of you've got this base level of people who are gaming the system, taking advantage of it, if you cut all of that waste and fraud out, then all of a sudden the money that was going to that now is available for more people that actually need it. And it actually opens up, in the long run, potentially more opportunity for more people to get Medicaid that actually need it. And it raises the base level of help that's, and support that's able to be distributed, versus right now, it's like everybody's gaming the system because bad behavior is being rewarded, good behavior is being punished. And so we're flipping the script with that. And so I think there are some very positive things here, even with the deportations and the wall and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of, hey, we want to back up and reward good behavior that's abiding by the law. And we want to actually follow through with what we said we would do when you break the law, and I think, absolutely. That economically that pushes things in the right direction. So I think,
I generally agree. I generally agree with that statement, Troy. I think that, looking at the individuals again, I wish, like Ryan said, I wish this was broken out into individual bills so we could tackle them one at a time and debate the finances of them one at a time, because that would be better. There's more stuff where we haven't gone over, but as far as like the general principles, I like cutting taxes. I think cutting taxes is good. Phasing out those clean energy credits is going to be very beneficial. That's a great way to put some taxes back in that those people did not need tax credits in that area. It's not helping anyone except for special interests having tax credits. And then this B, we have to cut. I'm going to get into the debt stuff here just a second, like the situation our country's in. We have to cut something. And I think that what they're cutting and the way they're going about saving things, I honestly don't even think it should be that controversial. The Democrats are definitely blowing it out of proportion. Mostly the cuts are going to waste, fraud, and abuse, and people that should not be on some of these things. And so I really don't think it's going to be this like detrimental, taking away everyone's benefits at the same time. But also, I'm not a fan of Medicaid and Medicare in general. That's a whole nother conversation, because we're going to get into it, but it's a major spending for the United States that it just never has made fiscal sense for us. And also, I just think the healthcare industry is broken to begin with, so I don't know why the government's propping it up. But I know that's a controversial statement, because a lot of people depend on those things.
We need to do an episode.
We don't know what would replace it, right? Before I move on, though, I do want to say, actually, I'm gonna move on to, and I am going to, before I get into this, I'm gonna defend Elon Musk here just a little bit, because I feel like you guys bashed him pretty hard with the whole, he didn't do enough at Doge. 2 points. One, Doge does not have the power to cut the government funding. You know who does have the power to cut government funding? Congress. That's what we're talking about right now. This is Congress's bill, Republicans' bill. And Republicans, every time they're not in power, they say, oh, those Democrats are spending too much money. When we get in power, we're going to cut and we're going to balance the budget. This is Republicans' opportunity to balance the budget, and they're not doing it. And so Elon Musk, I think, his job was to cut government inefficiency and cut government spending, although he had limited power to do that. I could see one reason why he's upset about this, because he was like, all right, we're going to save the government. We're going to get us out of this debt problem. And now that the Republicans have the chance to actually, they could be putting some of his cuts and some of the things that he suggested They could be putting all of them into this bill if they wanted to. They could have had every one of his cutting suggestions. They could have put them into this bill, and they're not. They're not codifying his Doge cuts into law, right? And so they could be overturned very easily in the next president, executive order, this and that. So I think that's part of the reason why he's upset. Now, I'm not saying that he's like a perfect guy and he only has good intentions, but I do think that he has legitimate reasons to be upset about the fact that Republicans always say, we're going to balance the budget. This is a chance to balance the budget, and they're not quite doing it. So we're going to get into the details here. So, however, I will say it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but we'll see what you guys think. So real quick, I'm really proud of my little breakdown here, patting myself on the back. But does this bill, does it increase the debt as Democrats and Elon Musk and anybody else that thinks we're spending too much money, or we're not cutting enough, or whatever it is, or we're cutting taxes too much, it's just not fiscally responsible? Is it actually fiscally responsible? Let's break it down. So the Congressional Budget Office has said this is going to raise the debt, essentially the deficit, over the next 10 years. It's going to add $2.4 trillion to our debt. So this is for the 10 years that we're talking about. This is a $2.4 trillion shortfall. We cut too many taxes. We spent too much. This is going to add this much money to the deficit over the next 10 years.
Can I interrupt?
We're
going to be more in debt.
Reese,
However, so you got something?
I just want to interrupt just to clarify something.
Go for it, Doug.
The idea of cutting taxes for the American people is contributing to the idea that we will become more in debt as a nation. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, so yeah, it's a budget situation for the government. As far as the government's concerned, in order to get out of having a deficit, like to pay for the spending, you have to be making so much money. Now, of course, you have the argument. If you cut taxes, maybe Americans can make more money, and maybe that will raise the revenue. We can get into that, but
the government doesn't have an income problem. The government has a spending problem. This is insane. Let's keep stealing money out of people's pockets because we can't get over our spending habits. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No, I get you. I totally agree with you. But from a budget standpoint, it's they either raise taxes or they lower spending. But anyways, what we're talking about here is when you add them together, this bill with the cuts and also the increase in spending, it is going to add $2.4 trillion in debt over the next 10 years. Yeah. However, this is a big
problem.
However, so you break that down over each year, that means that we have $240 billion more dollars, a shortfall that we have to make up for, right? Okay. So this is either $240 billion added a year to debt, or we make up for this in another way. Well, very interestingly, here's one way we've already made up for some of it. Doge has already saved us $170 billion this year so far, and we're only halfway through the year.
Wow.
So that's a big thing that's already been made up for. So again, we only have to hit, in order to break even on this bill, we only have to get to 240. So we've already saved 170 and the year's only halfway over. Here's another one. We have raised $53 billion more dollars in tariffs already this year than we did last year. And so if that continues, we could raise even more money by the end of the year in tariffs. And so that 75%, that's 75% more than what we raised last year. So that's a huge increase. And so when you add those together, it actually leaves us with $17 billion shortfall. So we only need to make $17 billion or cut $17 billion more dollars this year, and we will have already covered the added deficit that this bill adds. And I think that's 100% doable because, again, Doge has already saved us $170 billion, and that we're only halfway through the year. And we've already raised $53 billion more dollars than normal on tariffs. So even if we just get $17 more billion from tariffs for the rest of the year, which is extra dollars than we did last year, then we have essentially broken even on this bill and the things that Trump has done. And then the last thing is that doesn't even take into fact that we potentially have new tax revenue, because another thing this bill is doing is it's increasing drilling and mining on public lands.
Oh, yeah.
So by expanding drilling and mining on public lands, we now are going to have more drilling and taxes being paid on that drilling and mining for those businesses. And so if you add in that tax revenue, which I don't know what that's going to be, nobody knows it exactly, potentially this bill is actually saving the government money, is actually reducing the deficit and not adding to the deficit if you take into account Doge and the tariffs. I say the bill. I would say Trump's actions, because the bill does not include Doge and the tariffs. But if you include those into Trump's grand plan, then he's actually not increasing the deficit. He's decreasing the deficit. So what do you guys think about that, about my math or my analysis? Is this correct or is this totally wrong?
No, that sounds right. That sounds right. I would go back to my first question, my first initial question, which was how much of this money would we be spending anyways? You know, and I think that's really what this is we are going to spend certain amounts of money in order to do certain things through the government every year. It's not like we can just say, throw our hands up and be like, well, we're not going to spend any more money this year, because there's certain things we either want to get done or need to get done. And the big question is, are we making up for that money somewhere else? You know, and I think you laid it out pretty clearly. The other thought is, I think Elon Musk is a perfectionist, and I'm pretty sure he went into this with an idealistic version in his head. The same way he walked into Twitter first day with a sink in his hands and said, we're firing 90% of the employees. And then he did it. You know, he fired 90% of Twitter's employees and then changed the name to X. I think he was expecting to be able to do the same thing. And I think he wanted more than just to get it down to a $17 billion deficit, you know, by this point in the year. I think he was trying to reverse it and go the opposite direction. I think he was trying to pay off the national debt. You know, like I think he was trying to decrease the deficit. And so I think that's probably why he's saying, oh, now y'all are spending more money or undoing the things that we're trying to do. So that's my thought.
I think that what we see, I agree completely. Like there's money we're going to have to spend anyway. But if somebody's trying to get out of debt, the money they have to spend is basically food and mortgage or rent, like, and utilities, period. Like there's no buying a new pair of shoes. Probably they already have 3 or 4 already. There's no buying new shirts. Probably they already have plenty of those. There's no buying new toys. Probably already have, or there's bargain shopping for toys. Like there are serious lifestyle changes.
You forgot the Filibusted membership.
Oh yes, that's the necessary. Absolutely. 100%. Agree with that.
Shelter, Filibusted membership exclusive. There we go.
That's awesome. I think, add that in the necessary category. But for me, I think I like this analysis. This is fantastic because it kind of makes it seem like, okay, maybe moving the needle a little bit on this. But I would say that when we look at the debt, like it is a national security issue, the debt. Why is that? Because it's like borrowing. So where does the debt go to? Like, who's buying the debt? It's like Japan and China. They're buying the bonds. And if they decide, it's like borrowing money from your enemy. Like, that's ridiculous. They just stop giving you money. Like, how does that, what happens then?
Oh, so we need to do an episode about Japan because that is about to go down.
Well, yeah, but just to finish the point though, the point is if they decide we're done and they sell off, I mean, it's going to be a problem for them to sell everything off in a big loss. But if they decided to just sell off everything and be done with it, like it would crash the U.S. economy. We wouldn't have money to spend on anything. The dollar would be worth nothing.
That's why we need to talk about it because Japan is in a position now where they might be forced to decide we're done. So,
that's why this is a national security risk, because then all the trust in the dollar, like 70% of the world's transactions are done with the dollar. Like that's why we have such a strong dollar and the petrodollar. Oil is traded only denominated in the dollar. So like this is why it's a national security concern, because if you're trading currencies like on the fundamentals, the US makes no sense why it's a strong currency. It's only because of those factors that I just mentioned that it's a strong currency. And so if that goes away, it's goodbye dollar and that's goodbye US economy. And that is a big problem.
Ryan, are you saying that we should not be spending $25 billion new dollars on the Golden Dome that Trump can name? This is why this is one of my criticisms of the bill. I was like, okay, I get the wall and deportations. I think that'll save us money probably in the long run. But the $25 extra billion for a Golden Dome that he can put his name on, I'm like, I think sometimes he just likes to spend money on stuff. But I don't know if that's necessary.
I do think national security, I mean, for me, I haven't done a deep dive into what are the real national security risks like that the Golden Dome would solve versus other national security risks that we could spend money on or prioritize without spending money. Sure. And so I would say, for sure, we talk about like an EMP going off and the electrical grid being exposed and all this stuff. And well, now we find out China has kill switches in some of our power distribution centers that we bought from China. Like there's all kinds of national security issues that, we can stop missiles coming in, but there's lots of other ways to take the U.S. down from missiles. So I would agree. Maybe we need to have a conversation about whether that's the right place to be spending $25 billion.
Yeah, I think I would have preferred if they just like slid some money around there instead of adding new money to the defense. But that's just because we already spend the most money on defense out of anybody in the world. Anybody else have a take before I get to the ugly, which is the bill, which you guys are sorry, the debt, which you guys have already touched on. Anyone else have thoughts about Trump's general plan and what looks to be like with this bill and the tariffs and everything that he's
I think that
actually slightly
what
bringing
you
down
broke
the
down
deficit?
here,
Doug?
What you broke down here looks pretty good. Like I think you're onto something. I think it's like the right direction. Of course, there are going to be other factors and more specific numbers and all of that, but I think that your direction is in the right area, and that actually is confirmed by, I can't remember who it was. I covered this yesterday in the live stream, but there was another big important politician who said that actually the bill is going to save, I think he said $1.5 trillion in the long run. And that Elon Musk was just misunderstanding it, basically. So
I would agree with that again by my math, because I'm like, we're getting already close to paying off the $240 billion this year already,
right.
And they're saying like, well, we're going to add 2.4 trillion over the next 10 years, and I was like, well, you're not really taking into account the extra tax revenue. You're not taking into account some of these other cuts, and so if you take all of that into account, I do think it's actually slightly reducing the deficit every year. I don't know if it'll reduce it by a whole $1 trillion, but it does seem to be, in my opinion, his whole plan is already going to slightly decrease the deficit from my math, but I could be wrong.
And one thing I would just say, and you're probably going to get into this with the debt, the debt conversation, but the interest payments. I mean, who wants to pay interest? Nobody wants to pay interest. It's over $1 trillion. All right,
I'm going to cut you off right there.
Okay, go for it.
Let's get into the debt. Okay, so this conversation has been the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak. So we've hit on the bad as far as like some of the issues with potentially with this bill being an omnibus. Maybe some of the increase in spending that we're not in favor of potentially. The good, this is my breakdown of the good, in my opinion, is like, oh, actually, I think, including the rest of his plan, we may be decreasing the deficit a little bit. So that's a step in the right direction. Thumbs up, step in the right direction for sure. Let's get into the ugly. And again, I think this is another big reason why people like Elon Musk, who is really focused on the debt problem and the interest payment problem, which I will get into here, is like, well, wait a second, this was this is our chance to fix it, and we're not fixing it. Like, even if, and again, they're thinking that we're adding to the deficit, but even if we take away a little bit from the deficit, that doesn't really scratch the surface of the issue that needs to get fixed. So here is the issue. So we're looking at right now, we have a U.S. debt of $36.9 trillion. And each year, the government, again, this is talking about having a spending problem, not a collecting problem. Each year, we collect $4.65 in taxes and tariffs and stuff like that. Now, all these estimates are basically before Trump came into power. Okay, so this is not counting Trump's tariffs, and this is not counting this bill going into effect. Right? This is the status quo, last year's numbers. Basically looking into it. So we are running a deficit of $2 trillion every year. So every year we add $2 trillion new dollars to the debt. So this number grows and grows and grows, and it never goes down because we always are overspending on a yearly basis. And it's been like this for the longest time. I mean, before I was in high school, I did debate class in high school, and we were like at $11 trillion. And I had some ridiculous policy that I wanted to put forth in debate class that was going to cost $11 trillion. It was going to cost what the government debt was at the time, which had definitely had some holes in my debate plan. But I remember that because I'm like, oh wow, we used to be at 11 trillion, now we're at 36.9 trillion, and that has just shot up immensely. Why are we at this? Let's break down the spending. First off, our number one, this is actually my other brother says all the time, the government is a healthcare business with a military. If you break down our spending, that's what we are. We are a healthcare business who happens to have a military, right? And so our number one spending is on healthcare. So this is Medicaid and Medicare mostly, and this is $1 trillion a year. This is 26% of our spending. Our second biggest, and this is the biggest problem I think that Elon Musk is bringing forth. Social Security is next. Social Security is next. Second biggest spending. Again, almost $1 trillion in Social Security. Social Security, of course, is a little different because That money is gathered separately, but there's whole issues with that. They always end up moving the money around anyways, and so it's a little bit of a Ponzi scheme because we don't have enough money to pay back Social Security already. Let's get into the interest payments. Interest payments. We spend over $500 billion a year. This is more than every bit of money that we spend on defense. $579 billion, 14% of our budget is spent on interest payments for our almost $37 trillion debt, which means this $579, this is creating no value. This is literally just money that's just poof. We're just paying creditors in order to keep our debt. That is literally all this is. And this is a massive chunk of our budget, and it's giving nobody any benefit whatsoever. And this will continue forever and will get worse every year unless we figure out a way to actually pay off this debt. And then last but not least, we have 13%, a little lower, $5 billion spent on defense. And this comes out to be about 75% of all of our spending. And there's really nothing else. If you want to talk about like saving money, cutting things, you could cut everything else and we would still be in debt. Like there is literally nothing else to look at as far as cutting, in my opinion. Like you have to cut these things somehow or we will always be in debt. So what do you guys think about the debt problem and the bills? Tackling it, not tackling it? How do we tackle this?
No, I think this clearly lays out the plan or the reason Elon Musk had for coming in, taking over Doge, starting Doge, and trying to cut waste, trying to cut fraud, trying to cut government spending. It's because he's looking at the broader picture. I think most people look at the big picture and they think there's no way we can affect the big picture. So I'm just going to plant myself in this small spot and I'm going to try to do one thing, try to at least do good here. But he's thinking. He's probably the closest person you can get. I mean, he's like one of the richest, not the richest now, but one of the richest people on earth. He deals with trillions of dollars or billions of dollars, whatever it is, billions of dollars, I guess. So he's not dealing with trillions of dollars, but he's in the ballpark. And so I think there's this idea of he's looking at what have I done before that I'm able to replicate from a smaller scale to a larger scale. What could we do here? And I think most people look at these numbers and say, there's nothing we can do, right? But there absolutely is. If you get rid of the interest itself, think about it. This is a spiritual issue too. It's not just a economic issue. It's not just a spending issue. It's a spiritual issue. The borrower is slave to the lender, So there is one country who's a slave to another country right now, or is it's like indebted to another country right now, many other countries. And that's a problem. It's like it affects everything that we do. It affects everything we're able to do. It affects our future. It affects it's like $579 billion a year just in interest that disappears. And obviously, nations are indebted to each other and all that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of that weighs in there as well. But at the same time, I think it's insane. And I think we need to do something about it. I think that's how Elon Musk feels. I think that's why he's so mad, about this bill. Although I will say, this bill is probably doing more with the Medicaid cuts and those kind of things, trying to reduce fraud there because that's the number one spending issue. It's like it's probably doing more in the right direction than a lot of the things that we've done over the last several years. So,
but I think that it's exactly right. Interest is the problem, but you don't just you don't just snap your fingers and don't make interest payments anymore. So the question is, when you look at this and you say, look at all this spending and there's nowhere to cut. Look, it's all spoken for. The thing is, we need to zoom in a little bit. Okay, let's zoom in on healthcare, the number one expense. There was a 2019 study done from JAMA, I'm not sure how you say it, but they found that waste between 760 billion and 935 billion annually in healthcare spending. So let's talk about some other things. If we zoom in there and we actually look at this, so that means more than twice the interest. So if we made these changes that I'm going to talk about really quickly, we would more than pay for the debt. It would double the debt. You would pay for 2 years worth of interest on that debt. So if we zoom in, what do we find? We find administrative overhead. That's around 25% of total healthcare costs. Complex billing, coding, insurance paperwork, regulatory compliance, and fragmented systems. That's more expensive than other developed countries. It should not be there. We have overtreatment and unnecessary services. These are not medically necessary. Billions wasted on tests, procedures, prescriptions. That's driven by fear of lawsuits. It's a defense. It's called defensive medicine and financial incentives. We have high drug prices. It's 2 to 3 times more for prescription drugs. Now, I don't want to go into that one because I think that's a whole nother problem, that we have drugs as the fix instead of root cause fixing. We have fraud and abuse. Medicare and Medicaid fraud alone costs tens of billions of dollars per year. That includes phantom billing, upcoding, and fake patient claims. And I have a personal example of upcoding and upbilling, and that was fraud that I actually talked to the U.S. Senate office about. We also have inefficient care delivery. We have duplicate tests, read missions. You have medical errors. You have patient bouncing between providers without centralized records. That's another issue. Maybe we don't want centralization, but that's just a problem with the system. We have price variation, no transparency. We have identical procedure costs that can be 5 to 10 times more depending on the provider and the region. We have lack of transparency. We have preventable chronic diseases, which RFK Jr. is now talking about. Obesity, diabetes, heart disease. Those are all preventable through lifestyle changes, which is what our government should be talking about. So, yeah,
Brian, those are all the exact same things I was thinking about. Like exactly. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, no, the point is like, that is not necessary spending. Over half of that. I mean, it's more than twice the budget, what we spend on interest every year is wasted in healthcare spending. So for me, it's kind of like, get to work on that and stop blowing smoke about all this other stuff.
No, I 100% agree. I'm talking about the snowball effect that takes place when you start cutting enough to where you can decrease the debt. Then, the more we decrease the debt, the more the interest is going to go down, the less we're going to be paying the interest. And eventually we're going to wind up at that place that Trump is actually talking about, if we're actually able to decrease that enough to where we go, oh, we have all this money sitting around we didn't have before because we were wasting it on, the interest because we have all this fraud and all this waste that's taking place in all these other areas and we're spending way too much.
Right.
Thank you, Overflow is Glory, for gifting a Filibusted membership. Appreciate that.
Oh yeah, you can do that. That's awesome.
Hey, I want to write on that coattail a little bit of yours, Ryan, with the healthcare thing. I was actually going to point out, Reese, you had a typo in here. I think you meant to put sick instead of health in the
sick care.
Yeah,
right. Very good point.
That's
the United States is just so unhealthy. It's like
sick care system.
Looking at that $1 trillion spending on healthcare and just how horribly unhealthy this country is for being a first world country. Is like, how much of that money could be not spent on healthcare if we were a healthier country? There's something inherently wrong with that. We have a disease in this country, and it's this sick care mentality that we have where people are just generally unhealthy. And if we got this country back to a healthier position, maybe that number would actually go down. And I'm really hopeful that what RFK is doing with all of the policies and stuff that he's moving around is going to affect that positively. And it's a big issue, like all the things that Ryan just went over. But like at the end of the day, like the root cause of the biggest use of healthcare is sick people. We don't have to be as sick as we are. And that's proof positive right there that we are, like, for a first world country, come on, we're spending that much money on healthcare. What is wrong with this society right now?
And it's a like you said, a sick care industry. So it's treating symptoms. So it's like, here's a drug, and there's no drug, even Advil and Tylenol, there's no drug that does not have hundreds of effects in the body that are unintended. Like, there is no drug. And so it causes more issues. And so it's, here's another pill, here's another. So like, that is the system. And actually the pharmaceutical industry prices in lawsuits and losses that they're going to have when they're releasing a new drug. They actually price that in because they know what's going to happen. And what they're actually like, RFK Jr. talks all about this. Like, they price that in, they're going to put it out. They don't actually make any significant changes to the drug. It's really a marketing change. And then they put it out, and they know that 5 or 6 years later, there's going to be a fallout because it's going to be proven that, in vaccines as well, but there's going to be proven that it was a problem. And so then they're going to have to pay lawsuits and do all that. But you know what? They already got the next thing coming. So it's all priced in. They know that's the model. And that's what our regulators have allowed. And that's why it's called a captured regulatory agency.
Absolutely. Yeah, y'all are hitting on, I'm really glad y'all are hitting on this, because when I was looking over these numbers, this was my biggest takeaway, essentially, was like, okay, well, you got to have a military. I'm sure we could cut some money. I would like for us to, personally, I think there's probably a lot of, again, it's going to be like the Doge route. Like, no, I don't think we should be just like making massive, random cuts to our military, but the Doge kind of efficiency and waste and centralization and doing things like, people could talk about military waste all day long. I'm sure there's plenty. And that's, I'm sure we can make a lot of savings there. Social Security, that's a big hot topic, because it's like, well, we're paying the money. So the government has to pay people back. Personally,
don't
I
tax
would
us.
love to see Social Security go away. I would like it to be whatever money you have paid in, the government just pays us out. No more Social Security. That's whole nother topic though, because it's become a bit of a Ponzi scheme where we're like looking at not having enough money to fund all the people that are retiring and all that kind of things. And I don't think the government should be taking your money and saying, we know how to spend your money. We know how to invest your money. So we're going to invest it and then we're going to give it back to you. And it could have been okay if they kept it completely separate in its own account, but they didn't. And they ended up draining it and using it to pay for other things. And now it's empty. So again, that's why I keep calling it a Ponzi scheme, because it's just like, that's a mess. So it's like, we could rework Social Security. I would love to get to the point where we do away with Social Security and have just encourage people to invest their money that they're saving, since they don't have to pay Social Security anymore. But I do think the healthcare one is the absolute biggest one. Again, I know this is controversial because it'd be like, oh, well, you're going to cut people's healthcare. But all the things that we talked about, I don't know. And we have a whole exclusive episode actually on this. If y'all are interested in getting more into the health specifics of, like, we did a whole thing where we talked about vaccines and we talked about specific health. So it's somewhere on, I think it's on Locals. And it's an exclusive episode. It might only be on Locals because I think we were worried it might be censored.
That
maybe
one
by
is
YouTube.
only on Locals. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry to all the YouTube members, but it is that episode is actually free on Locals. So even if you're not a member, if you want to go check out our exclusive content and see what that's like, anybody can go on to the Locals, sign up for a free membership, and go listen to that conversation. Because we weren't able to put it on the YouTube end, we just went ahead and made that one open to everybody.
Yeah, so definitely encourage people to go listen to that episode, since it is for free on Locals. You can check out everything that a lot more that we talk about, RFK and the health stuff or whatever. But it is, I mean, all the things that you guys mentioned and more. I mean, there's even one problem is part of the reason why healthcare costs are so expensive is because hospitals are not allowed to turn anyone away. And so we have a homeless issue in our country where homeless people will come to hospitals on a daily basis to attempt to be admitted. And it costs hospitals all this money, and no one pays them back. And so they have to pass the costs off to everybody else, which ends up causing the whole system to increase, which ends up meaning the cost of insurance increases. And since the government has got involved in the insurance industry and became the biggest provider of insurance, essentially, the price of healthcare has shot up exponentially. The abuses have shot up exponentially. Yep. So I know it's a little bit of probably wishful thinking, but I wish we could just make this number go away and say, like, let's make the private market take care of it. Let's let charities take care of it. The government is, I believe, doing more harm, and all the abuses that we've talked about, and the healthcare industry in general is doing more harm than good. Even just one small little thing I heard the other day, like, most people's money on healthcare is spent. A lot of this money comes from people's last, I think, 30 days of their life. Whoa. Because we still have a philosophy of like, oh, we're going to try to keep this person alive as long as possible, instead of like, just send them home and put them on hospice, and don't do all these surgeries and procedures and random things to like make their last month of life so traumatic. And like, that's where most people's health costs come from, is actually their very last month of life, which is just insane. Like, that shouldn't be the case. We could go on and on and on about this, but I'm glad that we hit on the healthcare one, because this is the one where I'm like, we need just a renewal, a revival, a complete rework of healthcare, and maybe even the government completely exiting it as much as possible, because this $1 trillion is like, if we got rid of this and then we paid out Social Security and didn't have to pay this every year anymore, boom, $2 trillion deficit goes away just from those two items. But I mean, that's pretty much all I have. What do you guys think about that?
I'm going to vice president. That's what I'm saying. Like, do that. That's perfect.
The DEI ticket, Ryan and Reese, man. Health in America is also a national security risk. Over 70% of people in America ages 17 to 24 are not eligible for military service for either a medical condition or a mental health or physical condition or whatever. So that's also a national security issue. I mean, I think that the government creates more problems than it solves. So it's the same thing with the student loan crisis. That's because the government took over student loans and took it out of the hands of the private companies who actually evaluate a person's credit worthiness. So yeah, there's some rants there.
I'm going to address a couple comments. It's crazy that we got onto health. Like that's what this all boiled down to.
It is crazy because this is what I was looking at. I was just like, pretty much most of the money we spend is just on the health industry, and we all know how broken the hospital, the pharmaceutical industry. There's so many things, but there's layers and layers and layers and layers. It's like it's like a octopus with like the tentacles and everything, and it's like. And it's embedded in government waste, and then also people like we're being sold up the river or sold down the river with like all the poisons and things and like in our food and supposed medicine, and that's like part of the reason why we're so unhealthy is not because of our fault. It's not because Americans are just stupid and they don't know to eat a vegetable. Like there's reasons why it's like there are things that are harming us that are just in our food and in our environment that just shouldn't be there. And I'm hoping that gets addressed by some of the Maha stuff. But
there's a certain amount we can't control. That a couple thoughts, a couple comments. Isaiah says, "What's going on with the travel ban?" We are going to be addressing that tomorrow morning, so tune in for the live stream tomorrow when we'll actually talk about that. And then also another comment I saw was it costs too much to eat healthy. I would love to do a whole episode about how to eat healthy for cheaper than eating unhealthy, because I know that in a lot of ways it does cost too much to eat healthy, or it costs more to eat healthy, but there's a lot of ways you can do it. Like me and my wife, we have 5 kids, and yet we found ways to spend less money and eat more healthy. So it depends on the area. There are some other factors that are involved, what stores are available, that kind of stuff. But also there's ways to do it. So I would love to do a whole episode about that, and I would just to answer that question, just with the time we have limited, I would say Google how do I eat healthier and spend less money and find good stuff at the grocery store, because absolutely there's ways to do it. Me and my wife have spent a lot of time figuring that out. So anyways, all right. I think that's, unless we got anything else, we are over time. We're at hour 10. So y'all join us tomorrow. We're gonna be talking about the crazy travel bans that just popped up in all over the headlines this morning. Obviously we didn't talk about. So
right, good conversation, everyone. Thank you all for joining in.
Thank you, Reese. That was awesome, man. Love the spreadsheet.
Yes. Send that over.
All right. We will see y'all tomorrow, hopefully. But either way, we'll see you next time.